Hey guys, Arkan Templar. This is a video I've been meaning to make for a while. This is on the Communist Party of the Russian Federation. Um, Now people are gonna go, why are you talking about them? They're evil, they're Reds, they're damn commies. Well, that's true, but I think it's extremely interesting what the modern Communist Party looks like, the post-Soviet Communist Party. So I really think it says something because a lot of people like to talk about the social justice warriors and say, "Oh, they're just classic communists. They're just communists taking a new skin. They're the old left just with a new coat of paint." And I really don't think that's true at all. I think the old and new left are largely completely different. They come from different parts of society. They represent very different ideas. The old left would probably shoot the new left. Um, they would probably call them social degenerates and put them in concentration camps or put them in forced labor camps and send them to gulags. Um, I'm not keep when I'm saying this, I'm not trying to justify the Soviet Union, nor am I trying to say what they did was right and justified, or that the Soviet Union was a good thing. That's not really what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that the Soviet Union, while very brutal and corrupt in a lot of ways, was not nearly as degenerate as the modern left is. I mean, it was very brutal and it killed a lot of people and the economy didn't do well, but in terms of deliberately destroying the fundamental pillars of civilization, it was nowhere near as degenerate as the modern left is. Like when the Soviet Union was first founded, Lenin tried to bring in feminism and he tried to destroy the traditional family, etc. And this lasted for about 10 years. And when Stalin came to power, he basically, I think he said literally that the destruction of the nuclear family is bringing about a complete collapse of Russian society. And he more or less restored the traditional patriarchal Russian family, and some of the Soviet leaders were like really big on parents having a lot of control over their children's education and stuff. And that's stuff that the modern left would never do. If one of these like gender theorists had talked to Stalin, he probably would have sent them to the gulag and called them a degenerate who was threatening the integrity of the Russian nation. I'm not trying to justify Stalin. I'm just saying, well, Stalin was a brutal and cruel man. His vision of society was like that of most brutal, cruel tyrants. It wasn't the bizarre end of history, destruction of civilization vision that the modern SJWs have. Because history's had lots of brutal, cruel tyrants. And while they may kill a lot of people, society eventually recovers, and when they die, things kind of go back to normal. But the SJWs are trying to change the fundamental nature of civilization and destroy society for all time. So that being said, we come to the modern Communist Party of the Russian Federation, the successor to the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, which was banned by Boris Yeltsin because nothing says democracy like banning the largest political party. So, the Communist Party of the Russian Federation is currently the second largest political party in Russia. And let's look at what it says here on the wiki page. Ideology, communism, left-wing nationalism, Marxist-Leninism, socialist patriotism. Political position, left-wing to far left. Despite being left-wing to far left, the Communist Party of the Russian Federation is to the right of most Western conservative parties. It's actually far to the right of most Western conservative parties. It's to the right of most, like in countries that have a party like UKIP or like a party that's further to the right of the conservative party. Uh, they're further to the right of them, substantially further to the right. Um, they're more like something like the National Front, or I'm trying to remember what's the one, Liga Nord, or something like that, rather than an actual left-wing party in the modern sense. And I think it shows just how much politics has changed and how little it's changed in Russia, and how what was considered like the most radical ideology in human history is now like to the right of the conservative party. So let's go down here to the political party program, and we're just going to go through it, and we're going to see how bad communism sounds. Modern communism. Under the present conditions in the Russian Federation, the Communist Party believes it is necessary to, which is interesting because that basically is an acknowledgement of pragmatism, of saying we need to look at what's happening on the ground, and we need to make decisions based on that and not based primarily on ideology, which is a very right wing idea. Stop the extinction of the country, restore benefits for large families, reconstruct the network of public kindergartens, and provide housing for young families. Now, because in the modern West, the idea that the family is the building block of the society and that the native population should reproduce at a replacement rate an idea that's so far right, mainstream conservative parties won't talk about it. Mainstream conservative parties are in favor of mass immigration. They aren't in favor of the traditional family in any meaningful sense. They're in favor of not making it illegal, but they don't want that to be the basis of society. The center right party in Canada, like in most Western countries, would be perfectly happy if the native population had no children and it was entirely replaced by immigrants, and Britain became 100% Pakistani in the next 200 years. They would be completely fine with that. So, and to some extent, UKIP would be fine with that because they aren't against all immigration and they aren't in favor of right wing social engineering to try and promote. I think they are to some extent, but not nearly to the same extent as these guys. So their position on the family and how society should be structured is like would be considered fascist in the West. It would be considered far right. Nationalize resources in Russia and the strategic sectors of the economy. Revenues in these industries are to be used in the interest of all citizens. Now that's interesting because that's a position that the left has abandoned in Western countries. I don't remember the last time the left has really talked about nationalizing something. That came up a couple times during the West, the Occupy Wall Street stuff, but in general they've abandoned that in favor of dildo stuff. They don't really talk about that anymore. I guess that's kind of an old left policy. It's interesting. People will be dismissive of that, but if you keep in mind, in modern Russia, the natural resources are largely just used for oligarchs, Putin, and like party bosses. Just nationalizing them and just giving the money as a check to Russian families, kind of like minimum income, I guess, to help them make ends meet, doesn't sound that bad in contrast to the money just being given to oligarchs. So I don't know. Return to Russia from foreign banks the state financial reserves and use them for economic and social development. So once again, we have nationalist economic policies. They want Russia's state financial reserves to be in Russia. I think that's a position Texas has recently taken, where they want to bring the gold back to Texas, which is a logical position since we're pretty sure that the Federal Reserve has spent everyone's gold that it was supposed to be holding. Break the system of total fraud in the elections. Well, I don't know how serious they are about that, or if that's just because Putin's winning, but so they're more in favor of democracy than a lot of Western conservative parties. Create a truly independent judiciary. Oh no. I actually don't really like that. I don't like the judicial branch. I prefer a tyrant that I elect to a tyrant I don't elect. Um, or that's not really true because I prefer if there just weren't elections. But the judiciary is worse than like any other system. Uh, Carry out an immediate package of measures to combat poverty and introduce price controls on essential goods. The modern left is not in favor of that. The modern left I think we have to keep in mind is this is in a nationalist context, so this is for like the actual Russian people. Like in Canada, a lot of the welfare you can't even apply for if you're white. It's only for minorities or only for women, or only for gays. They're talking about this for all the Russian people, probably in preference to the actual Russian, like ethnic Russian people, or the people who have actual citizenship in Russia. So that's kind of like what the Republicans and like the far right are saying in Europe, and they call it welfare chauvinism. So that's actually an extremely right wing position. Don't raise the retirement age. Um, that's kind of a populist measure. I don't really know how to classify that. Restore government responsibility for housing and utilities. Establish fees for municipal services in an amount not more than 10% of family income. Stop the eviction of people to the streets. Expand public housing. Doesn't sound that bad to me. Public housing is always a dodgy prospect. In Russia, it might make sense though because Russia has a lot of cash and a lot of poverty. So there's worse ways. If it can be done in a semi-efficient manner, there's worse things to do than spend Russia's oil money on trying to develop some public housing to get people off the streets. I'd prefer if they owned their own houses, but I don't know. You don't really hear the left talking about that anymore. They don't really care about material things. Increase funding for science and scientists to provide decent wages and all the necessary research. That's actually a talking point from American school economics. That one of the purposes of government in a capitalist economy is to fund basic research, to fund science, and to create a climate of technology and technological development that will benefit all sectors of the economy, and that almost always works. And that is how countries like Japan and America and most of Europe have become so wealthy by deep in. I'm not saying that the private sector doesn't do a lot of it, but deep investments in technology and science pretty much always pay off. Ensure the availability and quality of healthcare. Yep, that sounds okay to me. That's also very old left because the new left doesn't really care about the availability and quality of healthcare. They have some bizarre system like Obamacare, um, whatever the fuck that is. Vigorously develop high tech manufacturing. So once again, they understand that industry matters. They're talking about making real investments, not bullshit investments in diversity programs, not bullshit investments in like the grievance industry, but investing in science, scientists, research, manufacturing, factories, stuff that makes things, getting people jobs, diversifying the economy. Ensure the food and environmental security of the country and support large collective farms for the production and processing of agricultural products. Once again, supporting producing real stuff, growing food, um, improving the environment. Russia needs environmentalism. The Soviet era devastated large portions of the country's environment. The Communist Party seems to have learned from their past mistakes, and it's different people who lead it now, anyways. But okay, so they're supporting once again, it's diversification of the economy away from just like stuff you dig out of the ground. It's growing things. It's real stuff. Prioritize domestic debt over a foreign debt to compensate for household deposits burnt in the disastrous use of reform. Yeah, so basically that's saying issuing bonds is better than borrowing from other countries because the money stays within the country and you give the interest to the citizens of your country and they spend it within your country. Pretty basic economics. Seems pretty good to me. Japan does that, and that's one of the reasons Japan's successful. Create conditions for development of small and medium enterprises. Okay, that sounds good. So once again, they're acknowledging that we need for a modern market economy, we need small medium enterprises, we need technology investments, we need stable access to food and agriculture. So I don't know. Most of this sounds like third position economics. It's capitalist, but it's kind of state capitalist. I think actually, if we go up here, it says they like the modern Chinese economy. Um, so that sounds pretty good to me. I mean, it's a definite improvement over a lot of economies we have in the modern West to some extent. I mean, the Chinese economy has a lot of problems, but you can't argue it's not producing things. Ensure the accessibility of cultural goods, stop the commercialization of culture, defend Russian culture as the foundation of the spiritual unity of multinational Russia, the national culture of all citizens of the country. That is to the right of pretty much every Western conservative party. They're saying there is a national culture. We need to preserve the culture. We need to not cheapen the culture. That culture is a spiritual thing that belongs to all people within the country, and we need to promote that and preserve it. I mean, that's like the most basic conservative principle possible. And most of the modern center right is like, no, I want money. No, we have to sell our culture. We have to like, we have to privatize museums and national parks and stuff like that so we can improve economic efficiency by 0.01%. Stop the slandering of Russian and Soviet history. I can't think of a modern center right party that actually believes in that. People say, well, the Republicans believe in that. Yeah, but whenever they're in power, do they ever do any shit about how shitty the public school system is? No. Even in states they've controlled for decades, they don't do shit. They don't do anything to improve the curriculum. They're like, well, they don't control it. Well, if they don't control anything, then what's the point of voting for them? And I mean, that's the issue, because they're like, well, the bureaucracy controls everything. Okay, then why should I vote for you? If you can't do anything about any issue that matters, even if we elect you, then fuck you. There's no reason to vote for you. Take drastic measures take drastic measures to suppress corruption and crime. That sounds pretty good to me. Russia has a big crime problem. If they want to go brutal, that's fine. And you can see this with modern like Republicans in America, and definitely the center right in other Western countries. The Republicans are significantly less pussy than the center right in other countries, but even there they're like police brutality. Didn't do nothing. We have to stop shooting these people. I remember the other day I was watching a video of a Dindu who was charging a policeman with a flagpole like a lance, and the cop shot him, and all these people were complaining, and they're like, "Oh, you can't shoot him. He didn't do nothing." Well, he was gonna kill the cop. Like like if he hit the guy in the head with a flagpole, it would have split his fucking skull open. So the Republicans are better about that, but yeah, I don't have any problem with cops shooting people who are doing shit like that. Strengthen national defense and expand social guarantees to servicemen and law enforcement officers. Veteran unemployment is a massive problem in America and in a lot of Western countries. And they're willing to take care of the people who fight to defend their nation. Ensure the territorial integrity of Russia and the protection of compatriots abroad. Once again, very right wing, very nationalistic policy. Institute a foreign policy based on mutual respect of countries and peoples to facilitate the voluntary restoration of the Union of States. Um, that's interesting. I actually don't support that. It depends who they want to re-annex. If they want to re-annex like Armenia and Georgia and some of like the kind of the European Orthodox countries, I'm fine with that. Like Belarus, I don't really think should be an independent country. Um, but the I don't know, the Randys in Central Asia, I don't know. I wouldn't want to re-annex them. So the party is in favor of cooperation with the Russian Orthodox Church, meaning they're in favor of having Orthodoxy as the state religion, which is extremely far to the right of pretty much any modern Western center right party. You would have to go to like Fidesz in Hungary to find a party that openly is in favor of a state religion, really. And in Hungary, it's just Christianity in general. They define the Constitution defines Hungary as a Christian country. It doesn't specify a denomination, but Hungary is a multi-denominational country, anyways. Unlike the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, the CPRF celebrates the rule of Joseph Stalin. I don't know. The party supported a ban on the promotion of non-traditional sexual relations to minors. So they are against public promotion of homosexuality, meaning the modern Communist Party, this left to far left party, is against gay pride parades, is against gay marriage, is against all this stuff that Glenn Beck is in favor of. People call Glenn Beck a far rightist for some reason, but he wanted to like boycott Russia, and I think he was calling for like a coup against Putin over this bill. So the Communist Party of the Soviet Union is to the the Russian Federation is far to the right of pretty much every modern conservative party. Like the conservatives in Britain legalized gay marriage, and you have the Communist Party being against like gay representation in the media at all. So they're actually like extremely far to the right. I think actually in Holland the far right is like in favor of that stuff. So they're to the right of the far right in most Western countries. So the factions of the CPRF is left wing nationalists, including the leader. And the party identifies socialism historically with Russia, which is to some extent true, and Russia culturally with socialism. They are influenced by the writings of etc., and see class struggle as having evolved into struggle between civilizations. So basically, left wing nationalism. The Marxist Leninist fascism, main faction, they're against both nationalism and social democracy. They are the smallest group. Social Democrats, who have a generally critical view of the. So basically, it's a left wing nationalist party. And that is the opposition to United Russia. Um, in some sense, they're to the right of United Russia. Like let's see here. Yeah, they support the re-annexation of what Eastern Ukraine. The rights of workers and the national interest. A renewed socialism for the 20th century. There comes, according to the party, there comes a confrontation between the New World Order and the Russian people with its thousand-year history. So they talk about Russian history. They talk about Russia as having a distinct identity and want a government based on Russia's identity. Communality and great power, deep faith, undying altruism, and decisive rejection of Lure's mercantile bourgeois liberal democratic paradise. So, yeah. um, so they basically support Dengism, which is basically nationalism. It's basically kind of semi-left wing nationalism. China is success. They like China. Um, so basically, they're a left wing nationalist party, but they're like old left. So they're like kind of economically left wing, but in some senses, they don't really seem to be uh, what's the term, central planning anymore. They seem to just be like state capitalism, which is fine with me. Um, their social policies are far to the right of Western right wing parties, and their international relations policies are extremely right wing. They're like radically right wing compared to modern right wing parties. So I just thought I'd do that because it's very interesting. I think it's very important to keep in mind just how radical the SJWs are and how much things have changed. This is Argent Templar signing out.